Sir, we'll be late again.
Inside a black SUV, a CEO sat frozen, watching a woman he'd never met standing in the rain with a baby in her arms. His driver urged him forward, but something in her stillness pierced through years of carefully constructed walls. He had built an empire by making calculated decisions, but this moment required something he'd buried long ago. What he did next would either save 2 lives or haunt him forever. Welcome to Story Theater. Take your seat, silence your phones and get ready to enjoy the story. The sky hung low and gray over New Orleans that morning, thick as old wool. Rain fell in sheets, steady and cold, turning Chartres Street into a river of shadows. Water streamed down the iron balconies overhead, dripping from the scrolled edges and pooling in the cracks of the sidewalk. The street smelled of wet stone and rust, of coffee grounds. Swept from doorways and magnolia blossoms beaten into the pavement. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, a low grumble that shook the air. Grace Miller stood beneath the narrow overhang of a closed antique shop. Her back pressed against the peeling green paint of the door. She was 27 years old, though her face looked older. Now, hollowed by sleepless nights and hunger that gnawed quiet and constant. Her cardigan, once cream-colored, was soaked through, heavy as a blanket of mud. She held it closed with one hand, clutching the fabric tight across her chest. The wool had lost its softness weeks ago, now stiff with dirt and rain. Her fingers were pale, the knuckles red and cracked from the cold. Beneath the cardigan, cradled against her body, was Ella. The baby was 6 months old. Small and warm, her breath coming soft against Grace's collarbone. Grace could feel the rise and fall of Ella's tiny chest, steady and trusting. That rhythm was the only thing holding her together. She shifted her weight, bending her knees slightly to ease the ache in her legs. Her shoes, worn thin at the soles, let in the rain. Her socks were damp, her toes numb. She had been standing here for over an hour, maybe 2. Time moved strangely now, stretched and warped by exhaustion. Grace's lips moved in a whisper. No sound came out at first, just the shape of words. Then, barely audible over the hiss of rain, she prayed. Please, please let someone see us. Please let someone help. Her voice cracked on the last word. She closed her eyes, feeling the sting of tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. She had prayed this same prayer yesterday. And the day before. And the day before that. The words felt hollow now, worn smooth like river stones. But she spoke them anyway because she did not know what else to do. Please, God, she whispered again, her breath fogging in the cold air. I know I haven't been to church. I know I made mistakes. But Ella didn't. She's innocent. Please help her, please. Ella stirred, making a small sound, and Grace opened her eyes. She looked down at the baby's face, pale and perfect, framed by a thin knit cap that was damp around the edges. Ella's eyes were closed, her lashes dark against her cheeks. Her lips moved in her sleep, as if she were dreaming of milk. Grace whispered again, softer now. Mama's here. Mama's got you. I promise I won't let anything happen to you. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was a promise she could keep. The street was busy despite the rain. People rushed past, heads down, umbrellas tilted against the wind. A man in a black raincoat strode by without looking, his phone glowing in his hand. A woman in heels clicked past, her phone pressed to her ear, talking loudly about a meeting. A couple jogged across the street, laughing as they ducked into a cafe, their voices bright and carefree. Grace watched them all. Some glanced at her, their eyes sliding over her face, her soaked cardigan, the shape of the baby beneath. Their expressions flickered, something like pity or discomfort, before they looked away and kept moving. Most did not even glance. They walked past as if she were part of the architecture, as invisible as the iron railings or the cracked bricks underfoot. Grace had learned that this was how the world worked. If you were standing, if you were not lying in the gutter, if you were not screaming or bleeding, then you were easy to ignore. You were just part of the background noise. Grace felt the weight of their indifference settle over her, like another layer of rain. She swallowed hard, tasting salt. Her throat was dry despite the dampness everywhere else. She had not eaten since yesterday afternoon, a stale biscuit given by a church volunteer. who had looked at her with kind eyes but empty hands. Ella had nursed this morning, and Grace had felt the pull of it. The way her body gave what little it had left. She wondered how much longer she could keep producing milk. She wondered what would happen when she could not. She shifted again, adjusting Ella's weight. The baby was getting heavier, or maybe Grace was just getting weaker. Her arms trembled slightly, and she tightened her grip, afraid of dropping her. The thought sent a spike of panic through her chest. She could not drop Ella. She could not fail her. Not again. Not like she had failed David, who had gone to find work and never come back. Not like she had failed herself, losing the apartment, losing everything. A bus roared past, spraying water onto the sidewalk. Grace flinched, turning her body to shield Ella from the splash. Cold water soaked the side of her jeans. She gasped, biting down on her lip to keep from crying out. The bus disappeared around the corner, leaving only the sound of the rain and the faint hum of traffic. Grace looked down at her jeans, at the dark stains spreading across the denim. She wanted to laugh. What difference did it make? She was already soaked. Everything was already ruined. Grace leaned her head back against the door and stared up at the sky. The clouds were thick and endless, no break in sight. She wondered if the rain would ever stop. She wondered if she would still be standing here when it did. Her legs ached. Her back ached. Everything ached. She felt like a machine that had been running too long. Parts grinding and breaking down. She thought of the shelter she had gone to last night. The woman at the desk had looked at her with tired eyes and shaken her head. "We're full. Try again tomorrow." Grace had nodded, her voice too small to argue, and walked back out into the rain. She had spent the night in an abandoned building near the river. A place with broken windows and a floor covered in trash and old newspapers. She had laid Ella on a piece of cardboard and curled around her, keeping her warm with her own body. She had not slept. Every sound had made her jump, afraid of rats or worse. Afraid of men who might wander in looking for shelter or trouble. This morning, she had walked back to Chartres Street. She did not know why. Maybe because it was familiar. Maybe because she had nowhere else to go. Maybe because some small, stubborn part of her still believed that help might come. Or maybe she was just too tired to think of anywhere else. Grace muttered under her breath, her voice hoarse. "Help will come. It has to come." She said it like a chant, like a spell that might make it true. But even as the words left her lips, she felt the lie of them. She no longer believed it. How could she? Days had passed. Weeks. No one had stopped. No one had asked her name. No one had offered more than $1, dropped into her open palm, without meeting her eyes. And even those dollars were gone now, spent on a bottle of water. And a pack of crackers that she had eaten too fast, her stomach cramping from the sudden food. "Who am I kidding?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "No one cares. No one is coming." She looked down at Ella again. The baby's face was peaceful, unaware of the cold, the hunger, the desperation. Grace felt a surge of love so fierce. It hurt, a sharp pain in her chest that made it hard to breathe. It was the kind of love that made you want to tear the world apart, to scream at God and everyone who walked past without seeing. But Grace had no energy left for anger. She only had enough left to stand. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Ella, her tears falling now, hot against her cold cheeks. "I'm so sorry, baby. You deserve so much better. You deserve a warm bed and clean clothes and a mama who knows what she's doing." "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." The rain kept falling. The people kept walking. And Grace kept standing there, her back against the door, her daughter in her arms, whispering prayers no one heard. A truck rumbled down the street, its tires splashing through puddles. A woman walked by with a dog on a leash, the dog shaking water from its fur. A man shouted something from across the street, his words lost in the noise of the storm. Grace closed her eyes again and held Ella tighter. She did not know how much longer she could stand. She did not know what would happen when her legs finally gave out. But for now, she stood. For Ella, she stood. And she kept whispering, over and over, the only words she had left. "Help will come. Someone will see us. Help will come." Even though she no longer believed it. Even though the rain kept falling and the people kept walking. And the world kept spinning without stopping for a woman and a baby on Chartres Street. The black SUV sat idling at the curb, engine humming low beneath the drumming of rain on the roof. Inside, the air was warm and dry, smelling faintly of leather and coffee. The windows were tinted dark, turning the gray morning even darker, but Michael Hayes could see out perfectly. He sat in the back seat, his briefcase beside him, his phone face down on his knee. He had stopped looking at it 5 minutes ago. Michael was 42 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair graying at the temples. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored and expensive, the kind that whispered money without shouting it. His tie was loosened slightly at the collar. He had already been to one meeting this morning, and he was supposed to be at another in 15 minutes. But he was not moving. He was watching. Across the street, beneath the narrow overhang of the closed antique shop, stood a woman. She was young, maybe late 20s, soaked to the bone despite the cardigan wrapped around her. Her hair hung in wet tangles around her face. She was not moving either. She just stood there, her back against the door, her arms cradled around something small. Michael could not see what it was at first. Then the woman shifted slightly, and he caught a glimpse of pale fabric, a knit cap, the curve of a tiny head. A baby. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. He leaned forward slightly, his hand resting on the edge of the seat. The woman was not begging. She was not holding out her hand or calling to passers-by. She was just standing there, staring at the ground, her lips moving in a way that made him think she was talking to herself. Or praying. The rain poured down around her, and people walked past without stopping. Michael watched a man in a raincoat stride by without even glancing at her. He watched a woman with an umbrella cross to the other side of the street. Calvin, the driver, glanced at the rearview mirror. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and steady eyes. He had been driving for Michael for nearly 10 years. He knew when to talk and when to stay quiet. Right now, he could see that Mr. Hayes was distracted. Calvin cleared his throat softly. "Sir," he said, his voice low and respectful. "We'll be late again." Michael did not look away from the window. "I know," he said quietly. "The investors are waiting," Calvin added. "They've been waiting since 9:30. "I know," Michael repeated. His voice was still soft, but there was something in it that made Calvin hesitate. It was not anger. It was something else. Something heavier. Michael's eyes stayed fixed on the woman across the street. She had shifted again, adjusting the baby in her arms. He could see the tremble in her shoulders, the way her knees bent slightly as if they might give out. He could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. And he could see that no one else was stopping. No one else was even looking. "My mother used to wait tables right here," Michael said suddenly. Calvin turned his head slightly, surprised. In all the years he had driven for Mr. Hayes, the man rarely spoke about his past. Calvin knew the basics. Michael Hayes had grown up poor, had worked his way through college, had built Hale Development Group from nothing into one of the most successful real estate firms in the South. But Michael did not talk about the before. He talked about the present, about deals and developments and profit margins. He did not talk about waiting tables. "Right here on Chartres Street," Michael continued. His voice was distant now, as if he were seeing something beyond the rain and the woman in the street. "At a place called Marie's. It's gone now, torn down 20 years ago. But she worked there for almost 10 years. Double shifts most days. I used to wait for her outside after school, sitting on the curb. Sometimes she'd bring me a biscuit or a bowl of gumbo the cook had made. She'd sit with me for 5 minutes before going back in." Calvin said nothing. He just listened. "She was tired all the time," Michael said. "I remember that. She'd come home and her feet would be swollen, and she'd soak them in a bucket of cold water. She never complained. Not once. She'd just smile at me and say we were doing fine. That things would get better." He paused. "They did. Eventually. But it took a long time." Michael's hand tightened on the edge of the seat. He thought about his mother, about the way she had looked in those years. Worn down but determined, tired but still standing. He thought about the people who had walked past her, too, the ones who had seen her struggle and done nothing. And he thought about the few who had stopped. The landlord who had given them an extra month when rent was late. The neighbor who had brought over a casserole when his mother was sick. The teacher who had stayed after school to help him with homework. Those small acts had mattered. They had kept him and his mother afloat when the world felt like it was pulling them under. Michael looked at the woman across the street again. Something in her stillness pierced him. It was not dramatic. She was not screaming or collapsing or drawing attention. She was just standing there, holding her baby, enduring. And that quiet endurance reminded him so much of his mother that it hurt. He made a decision. "Wait here," Michael said. Calvin turned fully now, his eyebrows raised. "Sir?" But Michael was already reaching for the door handle. He pushed it open, and the sound of the rain rushed in, loud and immediate. Cold air filled the car. Michael stepped out onto the wet street, his polished shoes splashing into a puddle. The rain hit him instantly, soaking through his suit jacket, plastering his hair to his forehead. He did not care. He closed the door behind him and started across the street. The rain was heavier than he had expected. It came down in sheets, blurring the world around him. He could feel it running down the back of his neck, soaking into his collar. His suit, which had cost more than most people made in a month, was ruined. He did not care about that either. He just kept walking, his eyes on the woman beneath the overhang. As he got closer, he could see her more clearly. She was younger than he had thought, maybe 27 or 28. Her face was pale and thin, her cheekbones sharp. Her eyes were red-rimmed, whether from crying or exhaustion he could not tell. The cardigan she wore was threadbare, stretched out at the shoulders. Her jeans were soaked through, clinging to her legs. She looked like she had not eaten in days. She looked like she had not slept in longer. The baby in her arms was tiny, wrapped in a blanket that might have been white once but was now gray with dirt and rain. Michael could see a small face, peaceful and sleeping, unaware of the cold or the rain or the desperation of the woman holding her. Michael stopped a few feet away. He did not want to startle her. The woman looked up slowly, her eyes meeting his. There was no hope in those eyes. Just weariness. Just the tired expectation of disappointment. Michael took a breath. The rain poured down between them. He did not know what to say. He did not know how to bridge the distance between his world and hers. So he started with the simplest thing he could think of. "What's her name?" he asked. His voice was soft, almost gentle. He nodded toward the baby. The woman blinked. For a moment, she did not answer. She just stared at him, as if she were trying to decide whether he was real or some kind of hallucination brought on by hunger and exhaustion. Then, slowly, her lips moved. "Ella," she said. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible over the rain. "Her name is Ella." Michael nodded. He looked at the baby, at the small face framed by the damp blanket. "Ella," he repeated. "That's a beautiful name." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She looked down at the baby, then back at Michael. She did not say anything else. She did not have to. The silence between them was heavy with things unspoken. With desperation and exhaustion and the faint, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this man standing in the rain was different from all the others who had walked past. Michael stood there, rain dripping from his hair, his suit clinging to his shoulders. He thought about his mother. He thought about the people who had stopped to help when she needed it most. And he thought about the kind of man he wanted to be. He took a step closer. "Let me help you," he said quietly. "Please." Café du Port sat on the corner of Chartres and Toulouse, its green awning dripping with rain. The windows glowed warm and golden, fogged with steam. Michael held the door open. Grace hesitated, then stepped through. Heat wrapped around her like a blanket. She had forgotten what warmth felt like. The smell struck her next. Coffee, dark and bitter. Stew, savory and rich. Fresh bread. Grace's stomach clenched hard, a painful twist that made her dizzy. She swayed. Michael's hand steadied her elbow. "Easy," he said quietly. "Come on. This way." He guided her toward a booth in the back corner, away from the windows. Grace moved like someone in a dream, her legs unsteady. She could feel people staring. A woman at the counter glanced over, eyes widening before looking away. An older man lowered his newspaper, watching them pass. Grace wanted to disappear. But here, under the bright lights, she could not hide. She slid into the booth, the vinyl cold against her wet jeans. Ella stirred in her arms. Grace looked down at the baby's face. Ella's eyes were closed, her mouth slightly open. She was warm. She was breathing. Grace felt a rush of relief so strong it made her throat tight. Michael sat across from her. He pulled off his soaked suit jacket and draped it over the seat. His white shirt clung to his shoulders, damp and wrinkled. He ran a hand through his wet hair. He did not seem to care about the mess. He just looked at Grace, his eyes steady and serious. A waitress appeared. She was middle-aged, with dark hair pulled back and tired eyes. She held a notepad and pen. She glanced at Grace, at the wet cardigan and the baby, and her expression softened. "What can I get you folks?" she asked. Michael did not look at the menu. 2 bowls of the seafood stew. Hot. A pot of coffee. A glass of milk, cold. And bread. The waitress scribbled. "Anything else?" "That's all. Thank you." She nodded and walked away. Grace watched her go, then looked back at Michael. She did not know what to say. Her mind felt foggy, slow. She could not remember the last time someone had ordered food for her. The last time she had sat in a restaurant, warm and dry, with the promise of a meal coming. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice cracked. Michael shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. Just try to relax." Relax. The word felt foreign. Grace did not know how to relax. She had been running on fear and adrenaline for so long that her body did not remember how to stop. She shifted Ella in her arms, adjusting the damp blanket. The baby's face was peaceful, unaware. Grace envied that innocence. The waitress returned with the milk first, setting it down carefully. Then the bread, steam rising from it. Grace could see butter melting into the crust. Her stomach twisted harder. "The stew will be just a minute," the waitress said. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, dark and steaming. Then she left. Michael pushed the milk toward Grace. "For her," he said, nodding at Ella. Grace blinked. She had not thought of that. She had not thought past this moment, past the warmth and the promise of food. But Ella would wake soon and be hungry. And Grace's body, worn thin, had less and less to give. "Thank you," Grace said again, her hand trembling as she set the glass on the table. The stew arrived. 2 wide bowls filled with thick, golden broth. Grace could see chunks of fish and shrimp, pieces of potato and celery. The smell hit her again, and this time she could not stop the tears. They spilled down her cheeks, hot and sudden. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. Michael said nothing. He just picked up his spoon and started eating, giving her space to collect herself. Grace looked down at Ella. The baby was stirring, her tiny face scrunching up. Grace had to feed her first. She always fed Ella first. That was the rule. The baby came first, always. Grace picked up the milk and took a small sip. Then she tilted it carefully toward Ella's mouth. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused. Grace pressed the glass gently against Ella's lips, letting a few drops spill in. Ella sputtered, then began to drink. Grace's hands were shaking. She could feel the tremor in her fingers, see the glass wobble in her grip. She tried to steady it, but the exhaustion and overwhelming relief made her hands shake harder. A few drops spilled, running down Ella's chin onto the blanket. "Sorry," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, baby." She wiped the milk away with her thumb, then brought the glass back. The baby drank more eagerly now, her small hands reaching up. Grace held it steady, or as steady as she could. More drops spilled. Grace bit her lip, fighting back tears. She felt clumsy and useless, unable to even feed her own child without making a mess. Michael watched quietly. He did not comment on the spilled milk or the trembling hands. He just ate his stew slowly, patient. After a few minutes, Ella had drunk enough. Her eyes were closing again, her body relaxing. Grace set the glass down and adjusted the blanket. Then, finally, she picked up her own spoon. The first bite of stew was almost painful. The flavors exploded on her tongue, so rich and intense after days of nothing. The warmth spread through her chest, down into her stomach. Grace closed her eyes for a moment, just feeling it. Feeling full. Feeling human again. She ate slowly at first, then faster, unable to stop herself. The hunger was too strong, too urgent. She scooped up the stew, the bread, everything. She did not care about manners or how she looked. She just ate. Michael let her finish. He sipped his coffee, quiet. When Grace finally set down her spoon, the bowl was empty. She felt sick and satisfied at once, her stomach full for the first time in weeks. Better? Michael asked softly. Grace nodded. She could not speak yet. Her throat was too tight with emotion. Michael leaned forward slightly, hands wrapped around his coffee mug. Tell me what happened, he said. His voice was gentle, not demanding. How did you end up out there? Grace looked down at Ella, at the baby sleeping in her arms. She did not want to tell this story. But something in Michael's eyes made her feel safe. Made her feel like maybe he would understand. The shelter was full, she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I went last night, but they had no room. They told me to try again today, but I knew they'd say the same thing. They always say the same thing. Michael listened without interrupting. So I went to an abandoned building, Grace continued. Near the river. It has a roof. Mostly. The windows are broken, and there's trash everywhere, but it's better than being outside in the rain. She paused, her hands tightening around Ella. I spent the night there. On the floor. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound made me jump. I was afraid someone would come in. Afraid of what might happen. Her voice broke. She looked up at Michael, eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to keep her safe. I'm trying, I swear I'm trying, but I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Michael's jaw tightened. He set down his coffee mug and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small white card, crisp and clean. He slid it across the table toward Grace. Grace looked down at it. The card was simple, with a logo and a phone number printed in black ink. Above it, embossed in elegant letters, was a name: Michael Hayes, Hale Development Group. Call me in 3 hours, Michael said. His voice was firm now, not gentle. Decisive. My foundation helps families like yours. We'll find you a place to stay. A real place. Safe and warm. We'll get you back on your feet. Grace stared at the card. She could not believe what she was hearing. This man, this stranger, was offering her hope. Real hope. Not just a meal or a few dollars, but actual help. The kind that could change everything. Her hands shook as she reached for the card. She picked it up, holding it carefully, as if it might disappear. She looked at the name, at the number, memorizing them. 3 hours, Michael repeated. Can you do that? Grace nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I can. She clutched the card to her chest, then did something she had not done in years. She stood, still holding Ella, and she bowed. Deeply, the way her grandmother had taught her to bow when someone showed you great kindness. Her body bent forward, her head low, her tears falling freely now, mixing with the rain that still dripped from her hair. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you, thank you. Michael stood too, uncomfortable with the gesture. You don't have to. But Grace stayed bowed, overcome with gratitude and relief and the desperate hope that maybe, finally, things would get better. That maybe God had heard her prayers after all. When she finally straightened, her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something new in them. Something that had not been there before. Hope. Grace stepped out of Café du Port into the rain. It was still falling, steady and cold, but it felt different now. Everything felt different. She had food in her stomach. She had warmth still clinging to her skin. And most importantly, she had the card clutched in her left hand while she held Ella with her right arm. The street was just as gray as before, just as wet, but Grace saw it through new eyes. Hope changed everything. It made the rain feel less heavy. It made the cold feel less cruel. She looked down at Ella, at the baby sleeping peacefully against her chest. We're going to be okay, she whispered. We're really going to be okay. Ella stirred slightly, making a small sound. Grace shifted her weight, adjusting the baby's position. The blanket had come loose around Ella's legs. Grace bent her head down, trying to see better, trying to tuck the blanket back in place. The card was still in her left hand, pressed between her palm and Ella's body. She used her right hand to pull the blanket up, wrapping it more securely around Ella's tiny legs. The baby settled again, her breathing soft and even. Grace straightened, relief washing over her. She took a step forward, then another. She needed to find somewhere dry to wait for 3 hours. Somewhere safe where she could keep Ella warm and comfortable. The card slipped. It happened so quietly, so smoothly, that Grace did not feel it. One moment it was pressed between her palm and the blanket. The next moment it was falling, tumbling through the air in slow motion. It landed face down in a puddle on the sidewalk, the water immediately soaking into the paper. Grace kept walking. She did not hear the soft splash. She did not see the card floating in the dirty water. She was looking ahead now, thinking about where to go, how to pass the time. Maybe she could find a library. They were warm and dry. They let anyone sit there. She could rest in a chair, maybe even close her eyes for a few minutes while Ella slept. She walked 10 steps, 20, 30. The rain fell on her shoulders, on her head, soaking through her cardigan again. But she did not mind. Not anymore, because in 3 hours, everything would change. Behind her, the white card lay in the puddle, Michael's name slowly bleeding into the water. 3 hours later, Michael Hayes sat in the conference room on the 14th floor of the Hale Development Building. The meeting had just ended. Papers were scattered across the table. Coffee cups sat half empty. The investors had left 5 minutes ago, satisfied with the presentation. It had gone well, better than expected. But Michael was not thinking about the meeting. He was thinking about the woman and the baby. About Grace and Ella. He was thinking about the card he had given her, about the promise he had made. He pulled out his phone and checked it for the 5th time in 10 minutes. No missed calls. No messages. He looked at the screen, at the time displayed in white numbers. It had been exactly 3 hours and 7 minutes since he had given Grace the card at the cafe. Michael set the phone on the table and stared at it. Maybe she was nervous about calling. Maybe she was still working up the courage. Maybe she had lost track of time. He would wait. He was a patient man. He had built an entire company on patience and persistence. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Michael checked his phone again. Still nothing. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The rain had stopped finally, leaving the streets wet and shining. He could see Chartres Street from here, though not clearly. Just a ribbon of gray in the distance. Calvin appeared in the doorway. Ready to head home, sir? Michael did not turn around. Has anyone called the office line? A woman, maybe. Grace Miller. Calvin shook his head. No calls, Mr. Hayes. Should I check with the front desk? Yes, please. Calvin left. Michael waited, his hands in his pockets, his jaw tight. Something felt wrong. He could not explain it, could not put it into words, but there was a heaviness in his chest that had not been there before. Calvin returned a minute later. Nothing at the front desk either. No messages. Michael nodded slowly. He picked up his phone again, staring at the dark screen. Maybe she never planned to call, he muttered, more to himself than to Calvin. But even as he said it, he did not believe it. He had seen the look in Grace's eyes. The gratitude, the desperate hope. That was not the look of someone planning to ignore help. That was the look of someone clinging to a lifeline. Let's go back, Michael said suddenly. Calvin raised his eyebrows. Back where, sir? To the cafe. To Chartres Street. Sir, if she didn't call, maybe. I know what it looks like, Michael interrupted. His voice was sharper than he intended. He took a breath, softening his tone. I know, but something doesn't feel right. I need to check. I need to make sure. Calvin nodded. He knew better than to argue when Mr. Hayes had that look in his eyes. I'll bring the car around. The drive back to Chartres Street took 20 minutes. Traffic was heavy, the streets still slick from the rain. Michael sat in the back seat, his phone in his hand, checking it every few seconds. Still nothing. He told himself he was being foolish. Told himself that Grace had probably decided not to call, had decided she did not need help after all. But he did not believe it. The SUV pulled up in front of Café du Port. Michael stepped out before Calvin had fully stopped. He walked quickly to the cafe entrance, his shoes splashing through puddles. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open. Inside, the cafe was quieter now, the lunch rush over. A few customers sat scattered at tables. The same waitress from earlier looked up as Michael entered. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Can I help you?" she asked. "The woman I was with earlier," Michael said. "The one with the baby. Have you seen her? Did she come back?" The waitress shook her head. "No, sir. I haven't seen her since you both left." Michael nodded. He looked around the cafe, his eyes scanning the floor, the booths, the counter. He did not know what he was looking for. Some sign, some clue. "You all right?" the waitress asked, concern in her voice. "I'm fine, thank you." But he was not fine. He was worried, and that worry was growing into something closer to fear. Michael walked toward the booth where they had sat. It was empty now, the table wiped clean. He looked under the table, between the seats. Nothing. He straightened, running a hand through his hair. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe Grace had just decided not to call. He turned to leave, and that was when he saw it. On the floor near the entrance, partially hidden under the edge of a table, was a small white rectangle. Michael walked over and crouched down. He picked it up carefully. The card was soaked, the edges soft and starting to disintegrate. The paper had absorbed so much water that it felt like cloth in his fingers. Michael turned it over. The ink had run, bleeding into the wet paper, but his name was still visible. Smudged but legible, Michael Hayes. And beneath it, barely readable, the phone number. He stared at the card, his chest tightening. She had not chosen not to call. She had lost it. Somewhere between leaving the cafe and wherever she had gone, the card had fallen. And now here it was, ruined and abandoned on the floor of a cafe she would never return to. Did she throw this away? Michael whispered to himself. Or lose it? But he knew the answer. He had seen her clutch that card like it was the most precious thing in the world. She had bowed to him, tears streaming down her face, thanking him over and over. She had not thrown this away. She had lost it, and now she had no way to reach him. No way to get the help he had promised. Michael closed his fist around the card, the wet paper crumpling in his grip. He felt anger rising in his chest. Not at Grace. At himself. He should have gotten her phone number. Should have written down where she was staying. Should have done more than just hand her a card and tell her to call. He stood, the card still clutched in his hand. The waitress was watching him from behind the counter, her expression curious and concerned. "If you see her," Michael said, his voice tight, "the woman with the baby. If she comes back, tell her Michael Hayes is looking for her. Tell her to ask anyone on this street how to find Hale Development." "Can you do that?" The waitress nodded. "Of course. I will." Michael walked out of the cafe. The air outside felt colder now, the wind picking up. He stood on the sidewalk, looking up and down Chartres Street. The same street where his mother had worked all those years ago. The same street where Grace had stood this morning, desperate and alone. He did not know where she was now. Did not know where she had gone. The city was too big, with too many streets and too many places to hide. She could be anywhere. Calvin was waiting by the SUV. "Any luck, sir?" Michael opened his hand, showing Calvin the ruined card. "She lost it. She didn't call because she lost the card." Calvin's expression darkened with understanding. "What do you want to do?" Michael looked down at the card again, at his name barely visible through the smudged ink. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know where she is. I don't even know her last name. Grace. Just Grace. And a baby named Ella." That was all he had. Michael climbed back into the SUV. He sat in the back seat, the wet card still in his hand, staring out the window at the street. Somewhere out there, Grace was still standing in the rain. Still holding Ella. Still waiting for help that she did not know how to find. And Michael did not know how to find her. Night fell over New Orleans like a heavy curtain. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the cold remained, seeping into everything. Grace made her way to the overpass on Claiborne Avenue, the place she had slept the night before. The place she kept returning to because there was nowhere else to go. The overpass loomed above her, a massive concrete structure that blocked out the sky. Cars rumbled overhead, a constant hum that never stopped. The sound was both comforting and oppressive. It meant the world was still moving, still functioning, even if Grace felt like she had fallen out of it completely. Beneath the overpass, the ground was dry. That was the only good thing about this place. The concrete above kept the rain off. But it also kept the warmth away. The wind swept through freely, carrying the smell of exhaust and garbage and damp earth. Grace found her spot near the far support pillar. Someone had left cardboard boxes there, flattened and water-stained but still usable. She had hidden a thin blanket behind the pillar yesterday, tucked into a crack in the concrete. It was still there. She pulled it out, shaking off the dust. The blanket was threadbare, more holes than fabric. She had found it in a dumpster 2 weeks ago. It smelled like mold and cigarette smoke, but it was better than nothing. Grace spread it on the cardboard, creating a small nest against the pillar. She sat down carefully, cradling Ella against her chest. The baby was awake now, her eyes wide and dark in the dim light. Ella looked up at Grace's face, her tiny mouth moving as if trying to form words. Grace felt her heart crack a little more. "I know, baby," Grace whispered. "I know you're hungry. Just give Mama a minute." Grace unbuttoned her cardigan with trembling fingers. She was so cold, so tired, but Ella needed to nurse. That came first. It always came first. She positioned the baby against her breast, and Ella latched on immediately, her small hands gripping Grace's shirt. Grace closed her eyes as Ella nursed. She could feel the pull of it, the way her body was still trying to provide even though she had eaten almost nothing today. The stew from this morning felt like a lifetime ago. Her stomach was empty again, growling and aching. But at least Ella was feeding. At least her baby was getting something. Grace looked around the space beneath the overpass. It was not completely empty. 20 feet away, an old man sat against another pillar, wrapped in newspapers. He had been there last night too. He never looked at Grace, never spoke. He just sat there, staring at nothing. Further down, near the edge of the overpass, 2 younger men huddled around a small fire built in a metal barrel. The flames flickered orange and yellow, casting dancing shadows on the concrete. Grace wished she could sit by their fire. Wished she could feel that warmth. But she did not dare approach them. She had learned to be cautious. To stay away from people, especially men, especially at night. She had Ella to protect. She could not take any risks. The temperature dropped as the night deepened. Grace could see her breath now, small clouds of white vapor that disappeared into the dark. She wrapped the thin blanket around herself and Ella, pulling it tight. It did almost nothing against the cold. The wind found every gap, every hole in the fabric, and pushed through. Ella finished nursing and fell asleep quickly, her small body warm against Grace's chest. Grace looked down at her daughter's face, so peaceful in sleep. So innocent, so unaware of how desperate their situation was. Grace felt something building in her chest. A pressure, like water behind a dam. It had been building all day, through the hope of the morning, through the loss of the card, through the terrible realization that help was not coming. And now, in the cold and dark beneath the overpass, that pressure was too much to hold. Grace looked up at the concrete ceiling above her, at the shadows and the rust stains and the graffiti. Her lips moved, forming words that came out as a trembling whisper. "God," she said, her voice cracking. "Why test the ones who already have nothing?" The question hung in the air. No answer came, just the hum of traffic overhead and the distant crackle of the fire. Grace felt tears sliding down her cheeks. They were hot against her cold skin. "I've lost everything," she continued, her voice breaking. "I lost my home. I lost David. I've lost my dignity. What more do you want from me? What am I supposed to learn from this?" She looked down at Ella, at the baby sleeping so peacefully. "She's innocent. She didn't do anything wrong. Why does she have to suffer? Why does she have to be cold and hungry? What kind of test is this?" Grace's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She pressed her face against Ella's head, breathing in the baby's scent. Even here, even in this terrible place, Ella still smelled sweet. Still smelled like hope. "I prayed for help," Grace whispered. "I begged. And for one moment, I thought you heard me. I thought you sent that man. Michael. I thought finally, things would get better." Her voice rose slightly, anger mixing with despair. "But I lost the card. I lost the one thing that could have saved us. Was that the test? To give me hope and then take it away? To show me what I could have had? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't understand. I don't understand any of this. The night stretched on. Grace did not sleep. She could not. Every sound made her jump. The old man coughing. The men by the fire laughing about something. A car horn blaring on the street beyond the overpass. A dog barking in the distance. Grace kept Ella close, one hand always on the baby's back, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing. As long as Ella was breathing, as long as she was warm and safe, Grace could endure anything. That was what she told herself. That was the only truth she had left. Hours passed. Grace watched the streetlight beyond the overpass. It was one of those old lights that flickered, the bulb dying. On, off, on, off. Grace found herself watching it obsessively, counting the flickers. When it stayed dark for more than a few seconds, she felt panic rising in her chest. When it came back on, she felt a flood of relief. Her faith felt like that streetlight. Flickering, uncertain, threatening to go out completely. She had grown up believing in God, believing that prayer worked, that good things came to those who endured. Her grandmother had taught her that. Had taken her to church every Sunday and taught her to pray before meals and before bed. But where was God now? Where was he when she was sleeping under an overpass with a baby in her arms? Where was he when she was so hungry? Her hands shook? Where was he when she lost the one card that could have changed everything? Grace closed her eyes. I want to believe, she whispered. I want to have faith. But it's so hard. It's so hard when everything keeps getting worse. The streetlight flickered again. On, off, on, off. Grace opened her eyes and watched it. The light always came back on. Even when it stayed dark for what felt like forever, it always flickered back to life. Maybe that meant something. Maybe it was a sign. Or maybe it was just a dying bulb, and Grace was looking for meaning where there was none. The sky began to change. Not bright, not yet. Just a subtle shift from black to deep blue. Dawn was coming. Grace could feel it more than see it. The air changed. The sounds changed. The birds started singing, hidden somewhere in the trees beyond the overpass. Grace had not slept at all. Her body ached from sitting in one position all night. Her back hurt. Her legs were numb. But Ella was still sleeping, still warm, still breathing steadily. That was all that mattered. As the sky lightened, Grace made a decision. She did not know if it was hope or desperation or just stubbornness. But she knew she could not stay here. Could not hide beneath this overpass forever. Could not give up completely. She would go back. Back to Chartres Street. Back to the same corner where Michael had found her yesterday. Maybe he would come back. Maybe he was looking for her. Maybe, just maybe, she would get one more chance. It was foolish. She knew it was foolish. The odds of Michael coming back, of him looking for her, of him finding her in a city of nearly 400,000 people, were almost nothing. But what else did she have? What other option was there? Grace looked down at Ella. The baby was starting to wake, her eyes opening slowly, her face scrunching up. In a moment, she would cry for milk. Grace would feed her. Then they would walk. Back to Chartres Street. Back to that corner. One more chance. Just one more. We're going to try again, Grace whispered to Ella. One more time. If it doesn't work, if he doesn't come, then at least we tried. At least we didn't give up. The streetlight flickered one more time, then stayed on. Steady, bright. Grace watched it for a long moment, then stood carefully, Ella in her arms, the thin blanket wrapped around them both. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful. Grace had forgotten that the world could be beautiful. For just a moment, watching that sunrise, she felt something other than despair. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Something that whispered that maybe, just maybe, today would be different. Grace folded the blanket and tucked it back behind the pillar. She would need it again tonight. She always needed it, but for now, she had somewhere to go. Something to do. A reason to keep walking. She stepped out from beneath the overpass into the early morning light. The air was cold but fresh. The streets were empty and quiet. Grace adjusted Ella in her arms and started walking toward Chartres Street. One more chance. That was all she was asking for. One more chance. The Hayes mansion sat in the Garden District, surrounded by oak trees and iron gates. Morning sun streamed through tall windows, filling the rooms with golden light. The house smelled of coffee and fresh pastries, of polish and flowers. Everything was clean. Everything was warm. Everything was safe. Michael stood in the front hall, watching his housekeeper Linda arrange lilies in a crystal vase. He had not slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's face. Saw the way she had clutched that card. Saw the gratitude in her eyes. And then he saw the card lying ruined on the cafe floor. Laughter erupted from the kitchen. Loud, booming laughter that echoed through the house. Michael turned toward the sound, and despite his troubled thoughts, he smiled. That laugh could only belong to one person. Ryan Hayes burst into the hallway, arms spread wide, a huge grin on his face. He was 38 years old, 3 years younger than Michael, with the same dark hair and strong jaw. But where Michael was serious and measured, Ryan was all energy and warmth. He dressed casually in jeans and a blue shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. There he is, Ryan shouted, striding across the hall. My big brother, the tycoon. Michael allowed himself to be pulled into a bear hug. Ryan slapped his back hard. When did you get in? Michael asked. Flight landed an hour ago. Calvin picked me up from the airport. Ryan stepped back, still grinning. Man, it's good to be home. Atlanta was fine, but nothing beats New Orleans. Nothing beats this house. Linda looked up from her flowers, smiling. Welcome back, Mr. Ryan. Breakfast is ready in the dining room. Linda, you're an angel. Ryan called out. He looked at Michael. Come on, let's eat. I'm starving, and you look like you need to talk. They sat at the dining room table. Platters of eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, and pastries covered the surface. Coffee steamed in a silver pot. Ryan immediately filled his plate. Michael poured coffee but did not eat. He just stared at his empty plate. Ryan noticed. He always noticed. All right, Ryan said, setting down his fork. What's wrong? You've got that look. Michael took a breath. Then he told Ryan about Grace. About seeing her on Chartres Street, about the cafe, about giving her the card. About going back and finding it on the floor, ruined. Ryan listened without interrupting. When Michael finished, Ryan sat back. So she lost it. And now you don't know where she is. I don't even know her last name, Michael said. Just Grace. And her baby, Ella. You could try the shelters. Ask around. But what if she doesn't trust shelters? What if she's hiding somewhere? Michael rubbed his face. I keep thinking about Mom. About how she would have wanted me to help. And I tried, but I failed. Ryan reached across the table and gripped Michael's shoulder. Hey, you didn't fail. You tried. You did more than most people would. The fact that the card got lost, that's not your fault. But I should have done more. Should have gotten her number. Should have driven her somewhere safe right then. Michael's jaw tightened. Instead, I just handed her a card and walked away. You had a meeting. You had investors waiting. Ryan squeezed his brother's shoulder, then let go. Listen, you can't carry the whole world. You did what you could. If you get another chance, you'll do better. But you can't beat yourself up for this. Michael wanted to believe that. But the guilt sat heavy in his chest. They finished breakfast in relative silence. Ryan tried to lighten the mood with stories from Atlanta. Michael smiled at the right moments, but his heart was not in it. After breakfast, Ryan excused himself to unpack. Michael walked out to the front porch and stood looking at the garden. The flowers were in bloom, bright colors against green lawn. The air smelled like magnolia and jasmine. It was peaceful, beautiful, and Michael felt guilty for having all of this when Grace had nothing. Calvin appeared around the side of the house. He had changed out of his driving uniform into casual clothes. His shift was over, but he often stayed late, helping with maintenance or just keeping Michael company. Heading home, Calvin? Michael asked. Calvin nodded. Yes, sir. Unless you need anything. No. Go home. Get some rest. Thank you for picking up Ryan. Calvin started toward his car, then stopped. He turned back to Michael. Sir, when I drove back from the airport, I took Claiborne Avenue. Same route as usual. Michael looked at him. And? Calvin hesitated. I saw her, sir. Michael's heart stopped. What? The woman, Grace. I saw her, standing on Chartres Street, right where she was before. Same baby, same place. Michael stared at Calvin, not breathing. You're sure? You're absolutely sure it was her? Positive, sir. I slowed down to look. She was standing under that same awning, the baby in her arms. She looked like she'd been there all morning. Michael felt something surge in his chest. Relief. Hope. A second chance. When did you see her? About 40 minutes ago. I would have called, but my phone died on the way to the airport. Michael was already moving, striding toward the garage. We need to go. Now. Right now. Calvin followed quickly. Sir, I can drive. No. You've been up since 5 this morning. I'll drive myself. Michael pulled open the garage door and headed for his silver sedan. Ryan appeared in the doorway. What's happening? Grace, Michael called over his shoulder. Calvin saw her. She's on Chartres Street. I'm coming with you, Ryan said immediately. Ryan, you just got back. I'm coming. Ryan's voice was firm. You might need help. Besides, I want to meet the woman who has my big brother this worked up. Michael did not argue. He slid into the driver's seat. Ryan jumped into the passenger side. Calvin stood by the garage, waving them off. Michael backed out fast, tires squealing slightly. He straightened the wheel and accelerated down the driveway. The iron gates were already open, and he shot through them onto the street. The drive from the Garden District to Chartres Street normally took 15 minutes. Michael made it in 10. He drove faster than he should have, weaving through traffic, his hands tight on the wheel. Ryan held onto the handle above his door but said nothing. What if she's gone? Michael said, more to himself than to Ryan. What if she left already? Then we'll find her another way, Ryan said calmly. But don't borrow trouble. Let's just get there. Michael's mind was racing. What would he say to her? How would he explain that he had been looking for her? That he had found the card, that he had not forgotten? Would she even trust him after everything? They turned onto Chartres Street. Michael's eyes scanned the sidewalk, searching. There were people everywhere, tourists and locals, people walking dogs and carrying shopping bags. Too many people, too much movement. There, Ryan said suddenly, pointing. Michael saw her, standing under the same green awning of the same antique shop, exactly where Calvin had said. Grace. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile. Her cardigan hung loose on her frame. Her hair was tangled around her face. Ella was in her arms, wrapped in that same gray blanket. Michael pulled the car over, double parking. He threw open the door and stepped out. Ryan followed. Grace was not looking at them. She was staring at the ground, her lips moving in what looked like prayer. She looked exhausted, defeated, like someone who had used up their last bit of strength just to stand there. Michael took a step toward her, then another. His heart was pounding. He moved slowly, carefully, not wanting to startle her. Grace, he said quietly. She looked up. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she just stared at him, as if she could not believe he was real. As if he were a ghost or a dream. You came back, she whispered. Her voice was so soft Michael could barely hear it. You came back. Michael nodded, taking another step closer. I've been looking for you. Grace's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She tried to speak but could not find the words. She just stood there, crying, holding Ella tight. Ryan stayed back, giving them space. But he was smiling, his eyes bright. He understood now why Michael had been so desperate to find her. This was not just about charity. This was about second chances. About not walking away when someone needed help. Michael reached Grace and stopped a few feet away. I found the card, he said gently. On the floor of the cafe. I realized you must have lost it. And I've been trying to figure out how to find you. I looked everywhere, Grace said through her tears. I went back to the cafe. I searched the sidewalk. I thought I'd thrown it away by accident. I thought. She could not finish. It's okay, Michael said. You're here. I'm here. That's all that matters. Grace looked at him with something like wonder. Why did you come back? Why did you look for me? Michael thought about his answer. He could talk about his mother, about the past, about obligation. But in the end, it was simpler than that. Because I made you a promise, he said. And I keep my promises. Grace bowed her head, overcome. Ella stirred in her arms, making a small sound. Grace looked down at her daughter, then back at Michael. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Michael glanced at Ryan, who nodded. Then he looked back at Grace. Come with us, he said. Please. Let us help you. This time, Grace did not hesitate. She nodded, clutching Ella close. Yes, she said. Yes. Grace stood under the awning of the antique shop. The same place she had been yesterday morning when everything had changed. The same place where hope had briefly flared to life before dying again. She had been standing here for 2 hours now, maybe 3. Time moved strangely when you were waiting for something that would probably never come. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the air slightly. Grace could feel it on her face, but it did not reach the cold inside her. Ella was awake now, her dark eyes staring up at Grace's face. The baby was quiet, almost too quiet. Grace worried about that silence. Babies should cry, should demand things, should make noise, but Ella had learned, somehow, that crying brought nothing. That the world did not answer her needs. Grace rocked gently, swaying from side to side the way mothers do without thinking. Her arms ached from holding Ella for so long. Her legs trembled from standing. Her whole body screamed for rest. But she stayed. She did not know why, exactly. Some stubborn part of her refused to give up completely. Some tiny spark that insisted maybe, just maybe, Michael would come back. That he would look for her. That the loss of the card was not the end of everything. People walked past. A woman with shopping bags. A man walking a small dog. 2 tourists taking pictures of the iron balconies. No one looked at Grace. She was invisible again, back to being part of the scenery. Grace looked down at Ella. I don't know what I'm doing, baby, she whispered. I don't know why we're still here. Maybe we should just go. Find somewhere else. Stop waiting for something that's not coming. But even as she said it, her feet stayed planted on the sidewalk. She could not make herself leave. The sound of an engine made her look up. A red SUV was slowing down, pulling toward the curb. Grace watched it with dull curiosity. Probably someone stopping to ask for directions. Or maybe loading something from one of the shops. It had nothing to do with her. The SUV stopped directly in front of her. Grace's heart stuttered in her chest. She stood frozen, staring at the dark tinted windows. She could not see inside. Could not see who was driving. For a moment, nothing happened. The engine idled. The street noise continued around them. And Grace stood there, barely breathing, hope and fear warring inside her. The driver's door opened. Calvin stepped out. He was still wearing his casual clothes from earlier, but his face was serious, focused. His eyes locked onto Grace immediately. Grace felt her knees weaken. It was him, the driver from yesterday, Michael's driver, which meant. Grace turned toward the back of the SUV, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Was Michael in there? Had he come back? Had he really looked for her? Calvin walked around the front of the vehicle, moving slowly, deliberately. He stopped a few feet from Grace. His expression was not angry, but it was questioning. Confused. Why didn't you call? Calvin asked. His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it. A hint of frustration, maybe. Or disappointment. Grace opened her mouth to answer but nothing came out. Her throat was too tight. Tears were already forming in her eyes. She tried again, forcing the words out. They came in a breathless rush. I lost the card, she said. Her voice shook. I searched everywhere. I looked on the sidewalk, in my pockets. I went back to the cafe. I asked the waitress if she'd found anything. I swear I didn't throw it away. I didn't lose it on purpose. I was adjusting Ella's blanket and it must have slipped and I didn't notice, and by the time I realized it was gone. I couldn't find it anywhere and I tried. I really tried. Her voice broke completely. The words dissolved into sobs. Grace pressed one hand to her mouth, trying to hold it together, but she could not. The relief and the fear and the exhaustion and the desperate hope all came crashing down at once. She cried standing there on the sidewalk, her whole body shaking. Ella clutched tight against her chest. Calvin's expression softened. He took a step closer. "It's okay," he said quietly. "It's okay. We understand." Grace shook her head, still crying. "I thought you'd think I didn't want help. I thought you'd think I was lying or using him or something. But I wasn't. I wanted to call. I tried to remember the number but I couldn't. I only looked at it for a few seconds and I can't remember numbers well and it was smudged and I just..." She could not finish. Calvin nodded. He reached out slowly, carefully, and placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. The touch was gentle, steadying. "Come with me," he said. Grace looked at him through her tears. "What? Come with me," Calvin repeated. "Mr. Hayes has been looking for you. He found the card on the cafe floor. He knew you'd lost it. He's been trying to find you." Grace felt something crack open inside her chest. A flood of emotion so powerful it made her dizzy. He had looked for her. He had not given up. He had not assumed the worst. He had come back. "He's here?" Grace whispered. "He's in the car?" Calvin nodded toward the back of the SUV. "Him and his brother. They've been driving around looking for you for the last hour. I told them you might come back to this spot. And I was right." Grace looked at the SUV. She could see shapes moving inside now, shadows behind the tinted glass. The back door opened. Michael stepped out first, his suit jacket wrinkled, his hair disheveled like he had been running his hands through it. His eyes found Grace immediately, and the relief that washed over his face was so clear, so genuine, that Grace felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. Ryan stepped out next, moving around to stand beside his brother. He was smiling, but it was a soft smile, understanding. Not pitying, just kind. Michael took a step forward, then stopped. He seemed to be holding himself back, giving Grace space. Letting her decide whether to come closer or run away. Grace could not run even if she wanted to. Her legs were shaking too badly. She just stood there, clutching Ella, staring at Michael with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. "I'm sorry," Grace said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry I lost the card. I didn't mean to. I was so careful with it. I kept it in my hand the whole time I was in the cafe and then I was outside and Ella's blanket came loose and I was trying to fix it. And it must have fallen and I didn't see and by the time I realized it was gone I couldn't find it anywhere and I went back but it wasn't there and..." "Grace," Michael said gently, cutting off her rambling. "It's okay. I found it. I know you didn't lose it on purpose. I know you wanted to call." Grace shook her head, tears still streaming. "But I should have been more careful. I should have put it in my pocket or held it tighter or something. It's my fault. It's all my fault." "No," Michael said firmly. He took another step closer. "It's not your fault. You were cold and tired and holding a baby. Anyone could have dropped it. What matters is that we're here now. That we found you." Grace looked down at Ella, then back up at Michael. "Why?" she asked. The question came out small and confused. "Why did you look for me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why did you come back?" Michael's expression softened. "Because I made you a promise. And because my mother taught me that when someone needs help, you help them. You don't walk away just because it's inconvenient or difficult. You stay. You keep trying." Grace felt her knees buckle. Calvin caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy now," he murmured. Ryan stepped forward, his voice warm. "Let's get you off your feet. You look like you're about to fall over. There's water in the car. And we can take you somewhere safe. Somewhere warm." Grace looked from Ryan to Michael to Calvin. 3 men, all strangers 2 days ago, all standing here now like they genuinely cared what happened to her. Like she mattered. Like Ella mattered. "I don't understand," Grace whispered. "Why are you all being so nice to me?" Michael smiled. It was a sad smile, but real. "Because someone was nice to my mother when she needed it. Because kindness matters. Because you and Ella deserve better than sleeping under an overpass." Grace's breath caught. "How did you know about the overpass?" "I guessed," Michael said quietly. "I've seen enough to know where people go when they have nowhere else." Grace closed her eyes. Fresh tears squeezed out. "I tried," she whispered. "I tried so hard to keep her safe. To do the right things. But everything just kept getting worse." "I know," Michael said. But it's going to get better now. I promise. Calvin's hand was still on Grace's elbow, gentle and steady. Come on, he said softly. Let's get you in the car. Get you somewhere comfortable. Grace nodded. She did not have the strength to argue. Did not have the strength to do anything but follow where they led. Calvin guided her toward the open back door of the SUV. The interior was warm and clean and smelled like leather. Grace climbed in carefully, still holding Ella. Michael slid in beside her. Ryan took the passenger seat. Calvin closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. As he started the engine, Grace looked out the window at the street where she had been standing. The spot under the awning that had been her entire world for the past few hours. And then they were moving, pulling away from the curb, leaving that place behind. Grace looked at Michael. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, Michael said. Somewhere you and Ella can rest. Somewhere you can start over. Grace nodded. She was too tired to ask more questions. Too overwhelmed to process what was happening. She just held Ella close and watched the city slide past the window. Feeling for the first time in weeks like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The iron gates swung open as Calvin drove through. Grace pressed her face to the window. Oak trees lined the driveway, branches forming a canopy overhead. The house rose ahead, white columns gleaming. It looked like something from another world entirely. Grace looked down at herself. At her filthy cardigan, stiff with dried rain and dirt. At her mud-stained jeans with holes at the knees. At Ella's blanket that had once been white but was now gray. She did not belong here. These people would see her and realize she was too broken to help. The car stopped. Michael stepped out. Ryan followed. Calvin opened her door, but Grace sat frozen, unable to move. I can't, Grace whispered. I can't go in there. Michael leaned down. Why not? Look at me. We'll ruin your house. Your guests will be disgusted. Michael crouched to eye level. Grace, it's just a house. Houses can be cleaned. What matters is getting you and Ella somewhere safe. Grace shook her head, tears forming. People like me don't go into places like this. We're not allowed. You're welcome here, Michael said firmly. You're my guest. Grace climbed out slowly, holding Ella tight. Her legs trembled. Michael led the way up the steps. Ryan and Calvin followed behind. The front door opened. Linda stood there, silver hair pulled back, kind eyes unchanged by Grace's appearance. Welcome, Linda said simply. Grace stepped through and stopped dead. The entrance hall stretched impossibly tall. Crystal chandeliers caught the light. Polished floors gleamed. Fresh flowers scented the air. Throughout the hall stood people. Guests. Well-dressed men and women holding wine glasses. They had been talking, laughing. Now they stood still, all eyes on Grace. The silence suffocated. Grace felt every eye cataloging her stains, her desperation. She wanted to disappear. Her knees bent automatically. Old habits. Old training. When facing people better than you, you made yourself small. Grace started to kneel. Michael's hand caught her arm. Not here, he said quietly. Grace looked up, confused. But I should. No, Michael said. His voice carried through the hall. You don't bow to anyone in this house. You're a guest. You have nothing to apologize for. Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. She did not know how to stand in this room without making herself small. Michael turned to the guests. Everyone, this is Grace and her daughter Ella. They'll be staying with us. I expect you all to make them feel welcome. A woman in blue stepped forward. Of course, Michael. Whatever they need. The spell broke. People moved again, talking quietly. Some nodded at Grace. Others smiled. No one stared. They accepted her presence as natural. Michael guided Grace upstairs. They climbed to the second floor. At the end of a hallway, he opened a door. The room was beautiful. A large bed covered in white linens. Tall windows streaming sunlight. A bathroom with gleaming tile. Everything clean and perfect. Everything smelling like lavender. This is for you, Michael said. You and Ella. For as long as you need. Grace turned, overwhelmed. I can't. This is too much. You'll rest, Michael said gently. You'll take a hot bath. Eat a proper meal. Sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the next steps. Linda appeared with towels and clothes. I'll draw a bath. I've got clothes that should fit. clean and comfortable. Grace looked from Linda to Michael, tears streaming. Why are you doing this? Why are you all being so kind? Linda smiled warmly. Because it's the right thing to do, dear. Let's get you cleaned up. That baby needs a bath too. Michael nodded. If you need anything, ask Linda. He paused at the door. Grace? You're safe here. No one will hurt you. No one will make you leave. You can rest without worrying. Okay? Grace nodded, unable to speak. Michael left, closing the door softly. Linda set towels on the bed and moved to the bathroom. Water ran. Steam drifted out. She returned and held out her arms. Let me hold the little one while you bathe. I'll give her a wash after. Grace transferred Ella. Linda cradled the baby expertly. Hello there, sweet girl. Let's get you cleaned up too. Grace walked to the bathroom on unsteady legs. The tub filled with hot water. Steam rose in clouds. She touched it with one finger. Perfect. She had not felt hot water in weeks. She stripped off her filthy clothes and stepped in, sinking down slowly. The hot water enveloped her like an embrace. She closed her eyes and let out a sob. A deep, wrenching sob from somewhere in her chest. All the fear and pain poured out. She cried in the hot water, letting it wash away weeks of dirt and despair and hopelessness. When she emerged, wrapped in a robe, she felt almost human. Her skin was pink from heat. Her hair clean for the first time in so long. Linda had bathed Ella too. The baby lay on the bed, wrapped in a clean towel, skin glowing. She looked like a different child. Linda had laid out clothes. Jeans and a soft sweater. All clean, all fresh. Grace dressed slowly, savoring clean fabric against clean skin. A knock came. Come in, Grace called. Michael entered with Ryan. Both smiled. You look much better, Ryan said warmly. Thank you, Grace whispered. For everything. Michael held up a hand. You don't need to repay anything. Just focus on getting better. On taking care of Ella. He paused. I can't undo your past, Grace. I can't change what happened to you. But I can help build your tomorrow. If you'll let me. Grace felt fresh tears threaten. How? Ryan stepped forward. We've been talking. Our foundation owns several properties around the city. Empty storefronts mostly. There's one on Magazine Street that's been vacant for months. Small place, but in a good neighborhood. Michael picked up the thread. We're thinking we could set it up as a small grocery. Nothing fancy. Just basic supplies for the neighborhood. You'd learn to manage it. Run the inventory. Handle customers. It would give you income. Give you purpose. Give you a future. Grace stared at them. You want to give me a store? Just like that? Not give, Ryan clarified. You'd work for it. You'd earn it. We'd provide the startup costs and training. But you'd be the one running it. Making it successful. Grace sat on the bed, overwhelmed. I don't know anything about running a store. You'll learn, Michael said. We'll teach you. And you'll have time. First, you need to rest. Get your strength back. Spend time with Ella. When you're ready, we'll start training. Grace looked down at Ella, who was starting to fall asleep on the bed. Grace's corner, she whispered. That's what I'd call it. If it were mine. Grace's corner grocery. Ryan grinned. I like it. Has a nice ring to it. The weeks that followed blurred together in Grace's memory. Days of rest and recovery. Days of learning. Michael and Ryan taught her about inventory and pricing and customer service. They introduced her to suppliers and contractors. They walked her through the empty storefront on Magazine Street, pointing out where shelves would go, where the register would sit, where the refrigerators would stand. Grace soaked it all in like a sponge. She asked questions. She took notes. She worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. Because this was not just a job. This was her chance. Her one opportunity to build something. To become someone. On a bright morning 3 months later, Grace stood on the sidewalk across from the storefront. Workers moved in and out, carrying supplies, installing equipment. And above the door, being carefully positioned, was a sign. White letters on a green background. Grace's Corner Grocery. Grace held Ella in her arms. The baby was bigger now, healthier. Her cheeks were round and pink. Her eyes were bright. She babbled happily, reaching for the sign. Look, baby, Grace whispered. That's ours. That's our new beginning. Michael and Ryan stood beside her, watching the sign go up. When it was finally in place, Ryan clapped his hands. There it is. Your store. Your future. Grace turned to them, tears in her eyes. But these were different tears. Not tears of despair, tears of gratitude, tears of hope. Thank you, she said. For everything. For seeing me. For helping me. For giving me this chance. Michael smiled. You did this, Grace. We just opened the door. You're the one walking through it. Grace looked back at the sign. Grace's Corner Grocery. Her corner. Her place in the world. She took a deep breath and smiled. Let's get to work, she said. The small office above the grocery store smelled like fresh paint and wood polish. Grace sat at the desk, a simple wooden piece Michael had found at an estate sale. Through the window, she could see Magazine Street below. Sunset painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink, bleeding through the glass and warming the room with golden light. Grace bent over her notebook, writing inventory notes. Flour, 20 bags. Sugar, 15. Rice, 30. Her pen moved slowly, forming each number with precision. Michael had taught her that good records were the foundation of a good business. Every item counted. Every number mattered. Beside the desk, against the wall, sat a white wooden crib. Ella slept there, her chest rising and falling. She was 8 months old now. Bigger, healthier. Her cheeks were round and pink. Her hair had grown in soft and dark. She wore a clean yellow onesie, a gift from Linda. Grace looked over every few minutes, just to check. Old fears died hard. The office was small but cozy. A single room with slanted ceiling and exposed beams. A lamp cast warm light. A calendar hung on the wall. In the corner stood a small refrigerator, humming quietly. Everything she needed was here. Everything felt safe. Grace finished the inventory for canned goods and moved to fresh produce. Tomatoes, 12 pounds. Lettuce, 8 heads. Carrots, 20 pounds. Tomorrow was delivery day. She would need to be downstairs early. She made a note to set her alarm for 5. The sunset deepened outside, orange fading to deep red. The street below grew quieter. Shops were closing. People were heading home. Grace could hear the distant sound of a car passing. A dog barking. The everyday sounds of a neighborhood settling into evening. She had been working at the grocery for 2 months now. The grand opening had been 3 weeks ago. People from the neighborhood had come. They had been kind, welcoming. They bought bread and milk and vegetables. They thanked her for opening the store. Grace had stood behind the register, smiling until her face hurt. She had not known she could feel this way. Useful, needed, part of something. The phone on the desk rang. The sound was sharp and sudden. Grace jumped slightly, her pen skittering across the page. She looked at the phone. It was a simple landline, black and boxy. Michael had insisted she have one for the business. She stared at it, watching it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. She picked up the receiver on the 4th ring. Grace's Corner Grocery, she said. Her voice was steady, professional. Hello, said a voice on the other end. Female, gentle, uncertain. Is this Grace Miller? Grace felt something cold settle in her stomach. No one called her by her full name anymore. Yes, she said slowly. This is Grace. My name is Lydia Cole, the woman said. There was a pause. I'm David's cousin. Grace's hand tightened on the receiver. David. She had not heard his name spoken aloud in months. She had tried not to think about him. Tried not to wonder where he had gone or why he had never come back. She had pushed it all down deep where it could not touch her. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, Lydia continued. I've been trying to find you for weeks. Someone at a shelter gave me this number. Grace said nothing. Her mind was spinning. I have some news, Lydia said. Another pause. About David. I thought you should know. Grace closed her eyes. Here it was. The answer she had been afraid to ask for. What about him? She whispered. Lydia took a breath. There was an accident, Lydia said quietly. Last year, in March, David was working construction in Baton Rouge. There was a collapse. Some scaffolding came down. Her voice wavered. He was killed instantly. They said he didn't suffer. The words landed like stones dropping into water. Grace heard them, understood them, but they did not feel real. They hung in the air, suspended in the golden light of sunset. He never made it home, Lydia continued. He was trying to earn money. He told me before he left that he wanted to get back to you and the baby. He said he just needed a few more weeks of work. But then, she trailed off. Silence filled the office. Grace could hear her own breathing. Could hear Ella stirring in the crib. Could hear the hum of the refrigerator. The world kept moving even though it felt like it should stop. He didn't abandon us, Grace whispered. Her voice cracked. He couldn't come back. No, Lydia said softly. He didn't abandon you. He was trying to provide. He was trying to do the right thing. Grace felt something break open inside her chest. Something that had been locked tight for months. All the anger she had carried. All the resentment. All the questions. They crumbled like old walls. David had not left her. David had not chosen to walk away. David had died trying to take care of them. I'm so sorry, Lydia said. I wanted to find you sooner. But I didn't know where you were. I've been searching, calling shelters, asking around. I'm glad I finally found you. Grace opened her eyes. Tears were streaming down her face, hot and silent. She had cried so many times over the past months. But this was different. These tears felt like release. Like something heavy lifting off her shoulders. Thank you, Grace said. Her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for telling me. There's a grave, Lydia said. In Baton Rouge, at St. Joseph Cemetery. If you ever want to visit, I can send you the information. Yes, Grace said. Please. I'd like that. They talked for a few more minutes. Lydia gave Grace her phone number. Said she would mail the cemetery information. Grace thanked her again. They said goodbye. Grace hung up the phone and sat very still. The sunset outside had faded to purple twilight. The room was dimmer now, the lamp the main source of light. Ella slept on in her crib, unaware. Grace put her head down on the desk and cried. She cried for David, for the man who had loved her and tried to provide for her and died before he could come home. She cried for the months she had spent angry at him, thinking he had abandoned her. She cried for Ella, who would never know her father. She cried for all the loss and pain. But underneath the grief, something else stirred. Something quieter but stronger. Relief. Understanding. Closure. David had not left her. He had tried. He had done his best. And that knowledge changed everything. It did not fix the past. It did not undo the hardship. But it freed her from the weight of wondering. Grace lifted her head. Her face was wet with tears. Her eyes were red and swollen. But she felt lighter, clearer, like a fog had lifted. She stood and walked to the crib. Ella was awake now, her dark eyes staring up at Grace. The baby reached up with both hands. Grace lifted her daughter carefully, cradling her against her chest. Ella made a small sound, content and sleepy. Your daddy loved you, Grace whispered into Ella's soft hair. He didn't leave us. He was trying to come home. I need you to know that. When you're older, I'll tell you all about him. I'll tell you how he worked hard and tried his best. I'll tell you he was a good man. Ella yawned and nestled closer. Grace held her tight, rocking gently. Outside, the street lamps flickered on. The sky deepened to dark blue. Stars began to appear, tiny points of light. Grace walked to the window with Ella in her arms. She looked out at Magazine Street. At the grocery below with its sign glowing in the twilight. At the neighborhood she was becoming part of. At the life she was building, one day at a time. For the first time in a very long time, Grace felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet. The grief was too fresh. But peace. The kind that came from knowing the truth. The kind that came from finally being able to let go of anger and fear. We're going to be okay, Grace whispered to Ella. Your daddy tried to give us a future. And now we have one. Maybe not the one he planned. But a good one. A real one. Ella's breathing slowed as she drifted back to sleep. Grace stood at the window, holding her daughter, watching the night settle over New Orleans. The city lights twinkled. The traffic sounds faded. The world grew quiet and still. Grace thought about all the people who had helped her. Michael and Ryan and Calvin and Linda. The customers who smiled at her and treated her with kindness. All these small acts of generosity had built a net beneath her. Had caught her when she was falling. Had given her a chance to rebuild. And David who had tried, who had loved her, who had died trying to provide. She could forgive him now for leaving. Because he had not left. Not really. He had been taken. Grace kissed the top of Ella's head. I love you, baby girl, she whispered. And I'm going to make sure you have everything you need. Everything your daddy wanted you to have. She carried Ella back to the crib and laid her down gently. The baby did not wake. Grace pulled a soft blanket over her, tucking it in carefully. Then she returned to the desk. The inventory notebook lay open. Grace sat down and picked up the pen. She looked at the notes she had been writing. Flour, sugar, rice. The ordinary details of running a business. The building blocks of a new life. Grace turned to a fresh page. At the top, in careful handwriting, she wrote David Miller. Father, loved, tried. Below it, she wrote the date of his death. March, last year. And below that he never abandoned us. She stared at the words for a long moment. Then she closed the notebook and put it aside. Tomorrow she would open the grocery. She would stock shelves and help customers and count money. She would do the work of living. But tonight, she would grieve. Properly, completely, for the man who had loved her and the future they should have had. Grace turned off the lamp and sat in the darkness, listening to Ella breathe. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, in the small office above the grocery, a woman sat with her grief and her gratitude. Finally able to let go of the anger that had been poisoning her heart. And for the first time since David had left, Grace cried without despair. She cried with understanding, with closure, with release. The tears were clean and clear. And when they finally stopped, Grace felt ready to face whatever came next. The sunset bled gold through the windows of Grace's corner grocery. Long rays stretched across the floors, illuminating dust motes. The shelves cast shadows. The register gleamed. Everything glowed warm and amber. Grace stood behind the counter, ringing up a purchase for Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived 3 blocks away. Milk, eggs, bread, rice. Today she had added flowers. These are beautiful, Mrs. Chen said. You have such a good eye for what people need. Grace smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You've reopened the neighborhood's heart, Mrs. Chen said. Before you came, we had to walk 6 blocks. Now we have a place to gather. A place that feels like home. Grace felt warmth spread through her chest. That means a lot. Mrs. Chen paid and gathered her bags. This neighborhood needs you. She paused. And that baby of yours is growing so fast. She's beautiful. Grace looked at Ella, who sat in a playpen near the counter. The baby was playing with soft blocks, giggling. She was 9 months old now. Strong and healthy and happy. Her dark hair had grown into soft curls. She looked nothing like the pale infant Grace had carried through the rain months ago. Thank you, Grace said. She's my whole world. Mrs. Chen smiled and left, the bell chiming. Grace watched her go. The grocery was quiet. Only a few customers browsed. A young man compared cereals. A teenage girl looked at snacks. An older man read labels. Grace looked around her store. Her store. This place was hers. She ran it. She made the decisions. She ordered inventory. She set prices. She hired staff. She was responsible. And instead of feeling terrified, she felt capable. Strong. Like she had finally found her place. The bell chimed. Michael and Ryan walked through the door. They were dressed casually. Michael carried a paper bag. Ryan was smiling. Hey, Grace, Ryan called, waving. How's business today? Good, Grace said. Steady. Big rush around lunch. Michael walked to the counter. We brought dinner. Linda made jambalaya. Enough for you and Ella. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. Even now, months later, they continued to show up. To care. You didn't have to. We wanted to, Michael said. He looked around. The place looks great, Grace. Really great. Ryan leaned against the counter. Remember when we first walked through? It was a disaster. Broken shelves, leaky ceiling, graffiti. And now look at it, Michael said quietly. Pride in his voice. You did this. Grace shook her head. We did this. You and Ryan and Calvin and Linda. Maybe, Ryan said. But you're the one who showed up every day. You learned how to run a business. You built relationships with customers and suppliers. You turned this empty building into a community hub. He gestured. That's all you, Grace. The teenage girl approached with chips and soda. Grace rang her up, asking about her day. The girl had a test tomorrow. Grace wished her luck. The girl left. I still can't believe this is real sometimes, Grace admitted. Some mornings I wake up and think I'm going to be back under the overpass. Back on Chartres Street. And then I remember. I have a home. I have a job. I have Ella safe and healthy. She paused. I have a future. Michael nodded. He looked at Ryan. Some unspoken understanding passed between them. Remember what Mom used to say? He murmured to Ryan. Help, even if no one claps. Ryan smiled. A sad smile tinged with memory. She'd be proud today. So proud of both of us. Michael nodded. His eyes were bright. Yeah, she would. Grace watched the brothers, feeling the weight of their shared history. She knew their mother had died years ago. Knew that her memory was why Michael had stopped to help a stranger on a rainy street. She understood now that kindness was not random. It was taught, passed down, a legacy more valuable than money. The sunset deepened outside, gold turning to orange to pink. The light shifted. The store glowed warmly. Customers finished shopping and left, calling goodbyes. Grace waved and thanked them. When the store was empty except for Michael, Ryan, and Ella, Grace walked to the playpen. She lifted her daughter. Ella reached up and grabbed Grace's hair, tugging. Grace laughed and kissed the baby's forehead. You gave me faith again, Grace whispered to Ella. The baby babbled. When I had nothing left, you kept me going. You made me fight. You made me believe tomorrow could be better. Ella giggled and pressed her hand against Grace's cheek. The touch was warm and soft. Grace closed her eyes, breathing in the smell of her daughter. Baby shampoo and milk and something uniquely Ella. The smell of love and hope and new beginnings. Michael and Ryan watched quietly. Grace opened her eyes. Thank you, she said. For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For helping me when I had nothing to offer. For believing I could do this when I didn't believe it myself. You don't need to keep thanking us, Michael said gently. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep building your life. Keep being a good mother to Ella. That's all the thanks we need. Grace nodded. She looked around the store. At the shelves stocked with food. At the register. At the windows showing Magazine Street. At the sign Grace's Corner Grocery. This was hers. Not just the building or the business, but the life she had built. The relationships with customers who knew her name. The routine of opening and closing. The satisfaction of helping people. The pride of earning her own money. All of it was hers. Hard-won and precious and real. The sun dipped below the horizon. The gold light faded. The store's overhead lights took over, bright and steady. Grace flipped the sign to closed. She locked the deadbolt. She walked back to the counter and began counting the register. Ella balanced on her hip. Michael and Ryan stayed longer, eating jambalaya at the small table in the back room. They talked about plans for the store. About expanding produce. About maybe adding a deli counter. They talked about Ella's growth. About how she needed a bigger crib soon. About how time moved fast. When they finally left, hugging Grace goodbye and promising to visit soon, Grace stood at the window and watched them drive away. The street was quiet. Most shops had closed. Only a few cars passed. The neighborhood was settling for the night. Grace carried Ella upstairs to the small apartment above the store. Simple but comfortable. A bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, living area. Everything Grace needed. She gave Ella a bath, singing softly while the baby splashed. She fed her and rocked her to sleep, watching the baby's eyes grow heavy and close. When Ella was sleeping soundly, Grace walked to the window. She looked out at Magazine Street below. At the city beyond. At the sky full of stars. She thought about the storm that had brought her here. The rain that had soaked her through. The desperation that had driven her to stand on Chartres Street. She thought about Michael stopping his car. About Calvin driving back to find her. About Linda drawing her a bath. About Ryan suggesting the grocery. About all the small moments that had added up to this new life. Not every storm takes, Grace thought. Some bring back what was lost. She had lost so much. Her home, her partner, her dignity, her sense of self-worth. But slowly, piece by piece, she had found herself again. Not the same person she had been before. Someone different, someone stronger, someone who knew what it meant to fall and climb back up. Grace pressed her hand against the window, feeling the cool glass. Below, the sign for Grace's Corner Grocery glowed softly in the darkness. A beacon, a promise, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there was always the possibility of light. The rain had washed her clean. The storm had brought her to the people who could help. And now, standing in her home above her store with her daughter sleeping nearby, Grace finally understood what it meant to be grateful. Not just for the things she had been given, but for the journey that had brought her here. For the strength she had discovered. For the faith she had rebuilt. She looked up at the stars and whispered into the quiet night, "Thank you." The city hummed its response. Cars passed. Lights twinkled. Life went on. And Grace, for the first time in a very long time, was ready to be part of it. She turned from the window and walked to her daughter's crib. She stood there for a long moment, watching Ella sleep. Then she went to her own bed and lay down, pulling the soft blankets around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New customers. New problems to solve. New lessons to learn. But Grace was no longer afraid. She had weathered the worst storm of her life. And she had survived. More than survived. She had thrived. Grace closed her eyes and let sleep take her, peaceful and dreamless and complete. What did this story make you feel? Would you have stopped the car that night? Leave your thoughts below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. This has been Story Theater.